Welcome to The Future of Immersion, Opportunities for Entrepreneurs. Please welcome your speaker, John Smart.
Okay, well, it's a real privilege to be here. Cosmo had me come out. I'm a futurist, and that's just anybody who gets up in front of people and waves their hands and talks about the future. And I also study foresight, which is the business of paying people to look to and analyze the future. It's called foresight or strategic foresight, professional foresight. It's been around since 1948. The first program that was created was the RAND Corporation. Anybody in here know where that is? Santa Monica, yeah. 1948, someone gave $10 million to a bunch of eggheads to look to the future of technology because they got so amazed by what happened in World War II, they didn't want it to happen again. And now there are hundreds of foresight think tanks around the world. I got my training at the Houston program. There's 22 places where you can get a master's or a PhD. The Houston program is the oldest, 1975. I got a master's in strategic foresight. So that just gives me the right to tell weeble stories. What's a weeble? They wobble, but they don't fall down. A weeble story is a story that has been told that keeps getting back up. Computers getting as smart as people. Is that a weeble story? Yeah. People knocked it down, and it just keeps getting back up. Trends seem to support it. Is a 3D printer in your home a weeble story that prints complex things? No. A 3D printer at the local Amazon warehouse is a weeble story. Self-driving, is a flying car a weeble story? Probably not. A self-driving car is going to come first, right? And then self-driving planes. How about biological immortality created by humans? That's not a weeble story. It's way too complicated. How about uploading? That's probably a weeble story because we're already today uploading animals with 80,000 brains using completely robotic methods. We just can't read their memories yet because you haven't cracked the code. There's about 20,000 neuroscientists working on that problem. So that story is wobbling pretty good. So the interesting question is, what stories do we care about as entrepreneurs? Because this talk is about immersion and entrepreneurship. And in particular, social entrepreneurship, doing good and making money. So I have this online book called The Foresight Guide. Everything but one chapter is now up on the web at foresightguide.com. 550 pages, took me 3 years to write, and it's the whole field of foresight. And there's a few interesting weeble stories in there. And I've cherry-picked a few for our talk today. So the first thing we need to say is, when you talk about the future, there's this basic triangle that all futurists like to talk about. The possible future, what could happen, the probable, what's probably going to happen whether you want it to or not, and then the preferable, which is a blend of the two. Does that make sense? It's always a blend of the two. The two bottom things are actually physics. There's physics that's predictable, and it's physics that's fundamentally chaotic. And then anything that has a brain, or a preference, or intelligence, that's in the upper corner. That's you and I, and all living systems, actually, right? All living systems have some kind of intelligence in them. So that's kind of deep. That's my deepest point for the slide, for the whole prezo. So her is a weeble story. An OS that sits as an interface between you and the world. Star Trek is, we love it, but it's science fantasy. It's not what we call RFF, realistic future fiction. Does that make sense? It's a soap opera set in the future with human values. It's really fun, but it's not a weeble. It's easy to knock it over. It's not going to happen. Little elements of it are going to happen, but not the story itself. Her is going to happen. Some variation of her is going to happen. How many people have not seen Her? Oh, you're in for a surprise. See that movie when you go home, okay? Try it. It's really one of the best sci-fi movies of the last 5 years. So here we are. I stole this from Wait But Why. How many people know what Wait But Why is? Great blog, isn't it? A lovely blog. Tim Urban. You know, we see this slight rise of the complexity of the machines around us, and we think things are going to continue on this slow slope, but no, we're actually at this knee of a curve. Things are going vertical. They really are. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here before we get into some actual immersive topics. So this talk is about weebles, where we may be going. Here's one example of an interesting weeble. If you live in San Francisco, where I do, you see a couple of these driving around in downtown. There's probably 2 of them now. They're both prototypes. What is it? Lit Motors. What's it called? The C1. It's a self-balancing, fully enclosed motorcycle. 2 gyroscopes, so it sits fully upright, like a weeble at a stop. Feet don't have to go out. Has internal airbags. They want to put external sensor-deployed airbags on it as well, which would make it safer than a car. You're completely 5-point harnessed in. And of course, someone's driving you. This is a taxi, it's the first versions, right? You're sitting on the back on your laptop and your Wi-Fi, and you're going from A to B in traffic twice as fast as any car. Why? Yeah, you're lane splitting all the way. And they're putting the little Teflon sliders on the side in case you rub into a car so you don't scratch their paint. Right? Is this a weeble? Go to Buenos Aires, what do you see on the inside lane of every highway today? It's all scooters. They've crowded out the cars on the inside lane. They don't have to lane split like they do here. Are most cars in the emerging nations going to drive themselves? And they're not really going to be cars. They're going to be these 2-wheel upright things that are 1/3 of the cost of a car. I'm trying to tell you, I'm selling a weeble story here, aren't I? What Tesla does in the emerging nations. So you guys decide if that's a wobbly or not. A lot of weird things are coming. So Mark Andreessen said software is eating the world. That's a great phrase. If we ask ourselves 3 words that really define how hardware and software are different today, I think openness, tools, and scale are the words. What's TensorFlow? Anybody? So it's Google's deep learning-based AI. What did they do to it just 3 months ago? They opened it up. Why did they do that? Why did they give that tool openly for anybody to use? Yeah, they want scale. They want hundreds of people, thousands of people playing with this tool because they know that deep learning is going to grow way faster than they could ever grow it. And if they didn't open their tool, who else would have opened and tooled and scaled deep learning? Would have been Amazon, it would have been Microsoft, it would have been anybody, Facebook, anybody else trying to be at the center of that hub. Does that make sense? Skynet, thank you. So it's a totally interesting world. There's crazy openness, crazy tools, and crazy scale. Does that make sense? That's Weebly, right? It's different. And crowds are driving scale. There's hundreds of thousands of people on many of these platforms. Kaggle, 400,000. Algorithmia, 100,000. Incentive, 300,000. Gerson Lehman Group, 350,000. These are technical problem solvers that you can hire for a problem. You throw money at them, and they just try and solve that problem as collaboratively. Now we have all of these things like Kickstarter, Indiegogo. What's Start Engine? What became legal in May in the United States? Equity crowdfunding. Every single one of you in this room can now be a venture capitalist, right? As of May. Isn't that an amazing world? $400 a minimum is all it requires, and now you get in on the IPO. You're not just buying some product on Kickstarter. You go to Start Engine, you're getting actual equity in a startup. Now, I know many people in the room aren't necessarily thinking, well, hey, I'm going to do that. Even with my 20% mad money, I'm not necessarily going to do that. I'm going to sell you a Weeble story as to how and why you probably will be doing that within 10 years, okay? We're going to get to that shortly. So now we're in the world of unicorns. What's a unicorn? A company that goes from startup to over $1 billion in less than 10 years. That's Aaron Griffith. And there's decacorns. Startup to $10 billion in less than 10 years. Now, there's a few of them. Show me. What are they doing all over the emerging nations? What are they dominating at right now? Smartphones. They completely edged out Apple in the low-cost smartphone, the $30 smartphone going into the emerging nations, right? Smartphones aren't very smart today. How smart are they going to be in another 5 or 10 years? Airbnb, Uber, they're also these decacorns, aren't they? Isn't that an amazing world? It's truly different because of the openness, the crazy openness in tools and scale. You come up with an interesting idea as an entrepreneur, it truly blows up to these mythical unicorn-like statuses today. So, one of our favorite shows, The Wall, first season. I think best episode, first season. Chaos, disruption, change. It can be, as Vera said, a pit, or it can be, what did Littlefinger call it? A ladder. Thank you very much. You win. You win. Okay. And so both of these things are happening. And the web is getting smart. It truly is. Remember PageRank? It's not called PageRank anymore. What's it called? RankBrain. Why is it called RankBrain? Because it has a deep learning-like brain behind it. Is that like a human brain? Yes. A paper just came out last year, Nature Neuroscience, that compared human cortex, the way neurons work in human cortex, to the way deep learning neurons talk to each other. The sensory processing looks the same. The deep learning tools that we're using today have captured a lot of the features, a lot of the algorithms of how this thing works. It's so different, this kind of computing, this kind of programming, that I think we should call it natural intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Does that make sense? You get one bit out of place in a config file in today's artificially intelligent, top-down, engineered, von Neumann-type systems, and the system can crash. What happens if you have one bit out of place in a neural network? What does the system do? Routes around the damage, just like your own brain does. I can't remember her name. Oh, I think about some other aspect of her. What school did she go to? Oh, Angeline. What did you do? You recreated the memory from all these partial stores and all these different locations in your brain. That's how incredibly resilient a neural net is. And that's how resilient these deep learners are that are driving cars, that are ranking facts today. So Google launched Knowledge Graph in 2012. And then just in 2015, you may or may not have seen this. Remember the anti-vaxxer websites? Don't vaccinate, you get autism. Google's Knowledge Graph is so smart now that RankBrain crawls the web, and if it finds a page that has 3 or more factual inaccuracies on it relative to the graph, what does the RankBrain do to its rank score? Pushes it into the crap zone. That's right. No longer on the first 10 pages, no longer the first 10 links. You Google vaccines, anti-vaxxers, they're gone. Okay, I've got to click 3 or 4 down to get them. You see how clickbait's going to go there? Can you see how even comment wastelands like today's YouTube will eventually be auto-sorted for truthfulness, probability, and relevance to your values? What if your values are skewed? Oh, we'll get to that. But at the very least, at first, people are going to find their tribes. Does that make sense? And a whole lot of the crap, if you will, on the web is going to kind of go away if you don't want it to. The web is getting smart. It's getting smart because of deep learning. These slides are available, so you can grab the links later. So I'm going to be flipping through a bunch of them. And Jeremy Howard's 2014 talk on deep learning, it kind of blows your mind how fast these things have learned. You know, their ability to auto-caption now, about 40% of the time, you know, man in black shirt playing a guitar, auto-caption, can't be distinguished, passes the Turing test relative to a human. And he says within a year, it'll be human competition. Within 1 year, 12 more months. So you get to find out whether that's true or not. What's deep learning? Deep learning are these neural nets that I mentioned that store little bits of information everywhere. There's the grandmother cell down the end that remembers your grandmother. That's in the fusiform face area in the human brain. That cell can actually disappear, but because you partially remember your grandmother in all these other locations, like I said, even if that cell dies, you actually create a new grandmother cell at the very bottom end because you've stored bits of your grandmother in all these other cells. Does that make sense? The other amazing thing about neural nets is because they switched 1,000 times a second in the human brain, you can actually search your entire brain within 1 second, well, 2, and know whether information that's being told to you is novel, partially novel, or something you already know. Conventional computers can't do that. And the last amazing things neural nets do, both deep learners and human brains, is they can weight multiple variables instantaneously, ridiculous numbers of variables in this, what's called a hyperparameter space. So that if any one set of associations that they didn't see before now becomes relative to the problem at hand, it immediately surfaces. Because the neural nets are constantly fanning out, looking for locations, fanning back in to figure out relevance. Fanning out, fanning in. Does that make sense? It's so different from the way conventional computers work that I really think you should call it natural intelligence. It's really a different thing. Here's some of the hardware that runs it. 2009, when NVIDIA finally realized they were an AI company. They thought they were a gaming company. And now they realize, wait a minute, I can use these tools to run these neural nets. They're so good. And now their last conference they just had in June what's it called? The GPU conference? I forget. Every year, NVIDIA has a huge conference in San Jose. It was basically like Macworld back in the 80s. It's really the place where the human-machine partnership cutting edge is. They had hundreds of AI people in there running all their boards. And here's an example. In 6 months, they copied what took Google 8 years to do in the self-driving car. They created this toaster-sized GPU that sits in the car. It's called Drive PX. And it learned off of this training data set how to get up to human-level performance in 6 months. And then they opened their data and said, hey, anyone who wants to put this in their car, let's see if we can make an even smarter car. So now NVIDIA is in the self-driving car. And of course, self-driving robot, everything else that's going to come space on top of that, right? One of the best videos I recommend on this is Tesla's solution, which is also deep learning inspired, which is a shared autonomy solution. Even harder than what Google did, where the thing takes over your driving. Shared autonomy. So the system is predicting what you're doing. Even if you're doing something bad, it tries to predict what's good. So both of you have control. And the system is constantly deciding whether you have control or it has control. Isn't that amazing? That little 17-minute video is going to show you how Tesla did it. Is it perfect? No. What happened in May? Remember that? Navy SEAL, Joshua Brown. Big semi came in front of him. It was white on a bright day. The AI didn't see it. He was crotch gazing, right? Watching a Harry Potter video, apparently. And, decapitated him, right? Everyone says, oh, that's terrible. Sure, it's terrible. But are those Tesla autopilot cars that are so many of the Teslas, all of them but the Roadsters have that now if you want to turn it on. Isn't that amazing? And it was pushed to them through the web. Am I telling you sci-fi or is this true, what I just said? It got updated, every Tesla car got updated through the web, the new autopilot, except for the Roadsters. And this one guy misused it. What do you think the next version is going to have? Is it going to have some little sensor up in the rearview mirror that watches if his eyes start to crotch gaze and gives a little beep and says, excuse me, your hands are supposed to be on the wheel. You can read a newspaper if you want, but you got to be eyes up, hands on the wheel. Because I'm not perfect. And that's the kind of future we're going to, a true human-machine partnership. So deep learning is going everywhere. They've got all these interesting boards, and you start thinking about the implications of this. You have things like a life text. What's that? That's basically a smartphone that is constantly stripping out all of the words that you're saying in conversation and turning them into searchable text and then flushing away the video or the audio because it might record other people and you don't want that. And what I just said is a trivial deep learning problem. Trivial. You don't need a lot of storage. You just need a little specialized DSP deep learner chip or software on your phone. And now you have a life log of your entire life. Why might that be useful? Linguists have shown that if I have 2 years of everything you've said, 2 years, that's how big the map has to be. And you have a tip of the tongue moment, a senior moment. What can the deep learner do? What can the natural language map do? Suggest the word that's on the tip of your tongue and it'd be right 80% of the time. 1 year's not enough. 2 years for most people is. Right? So you've solved the CRS syndrome, can't remember stuff for certain people. That's going to creep people out, and for certain people, they're going to turn that on, right? Isn't that an interesting world? What's a meme show? That's basically a deep learner that's listening in to everything that's happening, and on the back of your AR visor or on your laptop or on your smartwatch, it's throwing data, it's throwing pictures, it's throwing links that might be relevant to your conversation, and you're deciding whether to sweep those aside to watch later or drill down into them and stop and make them part of the conversation. That's a meme show. You think a lot of people are going to start using meme shows as an augmentation of their lives? I would argue they will. That's another weeble. And what's a poop cam? I love this one. Many of us in LA or New York, big cities, you know, we got these neighbors, they're not so responsible, and they don't clean up after their dogs or cats if they walk their cat. You know, business, right? You can walk cats, by the way, up in Silicon Valley where I live. You see people walking cats. So a poop cam is just a DSP that's watching for that signature image. And then what does it say? It says, hey, pick up your stuff. That is a couple dollar chip stuck into a little sensor on your lawn. And some people are going to upload that image to Nextdoor or even YouTube and socially shame people, and all kinds of bad stuff's going to happen. The lawyers are going to sort out whether that's legal or not. But for most of us, it would just be that little tap on the shoulder, the little poop cam making a little noise saying, "Oop, hey, you're walking away. You forgot to clean up your business." Creepy and yet interesting. Incredibly different world, right? And maybe the most interesting of all are these smart agents like we have here. Google Assistant, Siri, Alexa, Cortana, Viv, the new Siri startup, Doer, which is Baidu's agent. These things are all fighting each other. Facebook's M. They're all fighting each other to become a personal sim. What's that? It's kind of like Carson up here in the upper right, you know, Downton Abbey. This little butler that has a simulation of your preferences in its head. It's a sim of you. It doesn't necessarily look like you, but it has this simulation of your values. Does that make sense? Can you see how people would want that? And you see how some people would be creeped out by that? So here's a weeble story. You're reaching for a can of tuna in 2030, and your sim has been tracking everything you've been saying, watching you for quite some time. How are we doing on time, by the way? We're done? Good. Reaching for a can of tuna, and it says, move your hand a couple inches, because this one better reflects your values, and it sends an automatic boycott message to the others, right? See how you have a lobby sim now? You see how important open source is in this kind of a world? Because you want a sim, you necessarily know that it reflects your values. Okay, last slide. I have a series on Medium. It's going to be 20 parts. It's in 4 parts already, called Your Personal Sim, The Brave New World of Smart Agents and Their Data. And I think when you think of mediated reality and the kinds of immersion possibilities that come from these tools, they're very exciting. And I did have a few more slides specifically on that I apologize I didn't get to, but they'll be up on the links. Thanks very much.